Next up, we're going to watch The Stranger by Andre Torres. Nice glitching at the beginning, instantly setting the tone, instantly letting us know how our protagonist is feeling. Very creepy door there. And the stillness of the frame builds the tension. Because of course we all expect something to happen, but we don't know when it's going to happen. And there it was. Boom. Okay, great job on The Stranger. So there were a lot of entries into this challenge that had to do with a single person in the house who hears a noise, goes to investigate, and then there's some sort of intruder. And probably it's because that's what my video was about, so there were a lot of sort of copycats or people being inspired by that general premise. And this was one of the best ones, I thought. And I think it was good because I think it was effective because of the pacing, because it very cleverly used stillness and action. It used silence and sudden loud noises in a way that you can't quite predict. It was just a little bit unpredictable. And one problem with trying to create these jump scares in horror type scenes is that everybody has seen a ton of them, and it's really hard to surprise people anymore. You know, if somebody is, I don't know, walking down a hallway and they open the door and they look, you know, through the doorway, you know that the monster is going to be right behind them when they come back and look this way, right? We've all seen that scene a million times. Or when they open the medicine cabinet, you know, in the bathroom, you know that when they close that door, then in the reflection of the mirror, the monster is going to be there. So because we're so familiar with the tropes of horror, it's hard to create a surprise. And I think most of the time, this short film does a good job of at least having a little bit of surprise in there. It's still, you know, still predictable to me. Of course, we know that at the end there's going to be a shocker moment. Otherwise, it's not an effective short film. But other than that, you know, there were little things that did catch me off guard, such as when the bag head guy, Marshmallow here, appears. There. So just seeing somebody run across the frame. See, you see someone run across the frame, but then we cut and there's someone just standing there. And that little sort of dissonance between what we thought we just saw and what we're seeing now, because if someone just ran across the hallway, they wouldn't be standing in the next moment. That little bit of sort of cognitive dissonance creates a feeling that we don't know if what we're seeing is real. You know, it makes the scene a little bit more surreal. It makes it a little weirder. And that's good. You know, for a horror short, you want it to be weird. And also the fact that the horror monster himself is a bit inexplicable. Maybe this was just the result of, I don't know, not having a budget for a costume or not having a costume in the house. They just drew two X's on a paper bag and put it on a guy's head. Whatever, it works. It's unsettling because why the heck would somebody walk around with two X's over his face? Or why the heck would somebody walk around with the paper bag over his head when he can't even see? You know, he can't see where he's going. It's hard to be a serial killer if you can't see anything, if you're walking around blind. So all that makes it seem a little bit unreal, which is good because then we think maybe she's imagining the whole thing. And one other little moment I want to point out here that I thought was effective was when she comes out from the covers here, right? We're seeing from her perspective, and then she starts walking, and I kind of like this shot. We see shots like this a lot in movies where the camera is walking with the person. And what's nice about the shot is that it's a little bit off kilter. It's a little bit Dutched like this. And it's a little bit shaky, right? Whereas the shots before were very steady. So when she's sitting, because she doesn't feel like she's in as much danger yet, the shots are steady. And we're not quite inside her head as much in the beginning. And then later, the shots become shakier as she moves around more, and as we see things more from her perspective. And this is a common type of progression when you're editing a scene with physical tension. In other words, a scene where a character is in physical danger. And sometimes this kind of shooting and editing is done in scenes that are just about emotional tension as well. But basically, if your character is in more danger, you want to have a little more camera shake. If your character's safer, then you want to have things be more steady. If your character's in less danger, your horizon's level. If your character's in more danger, your horizon goes crooked. And then, the final shocker moment, it's played well. Predictable to me, but played pretty well. The only issue here, though, actually is screen direction. We have a small screen direction issue. Screen direction is the direction that your character is looking in the shot. So right now I'm looking straight at you, but watch my nose. If I look this way, I am looking screen right. And if I look this way, I'm looking screen left. So the direction that your character is looking toward the edge of the frame needs to be accounted for in every scene. And if you have two characters who are supposed to be looking at each other, then one should be looking screen right, and the other character should be looking screen left. But in this quick cut sequence, she looks screen left. See that? And then he is also facing screen left. He should be facing screen right, so it looks like he's about to attack her instead of attacking some unseen target. So that's the only sort of editing note I want to make here. But nice job on The Stranger. Next up, we're watching Stay Home, Stay Safe, Save Lives by Carol Pluchinski. And I think the gimbal work here is just beautiful. And the truly seamless edits, like these edits are really seamless, and they seem to actually somewhat follow the geography of the house. And the way he handled that focus and the lighting there in the kitchen, nice job. If you want to learn a whole lot more, then join my film school, Unscripted Studio, where I teach my unique style of improvisational filmmaking. You'll learn storytelling, directing and shooting, gear, editing, transitions and effects, and building your business. And most importantly, you can join our online community forum where you'll do filmmaking challenges, share your work, and get creative feedback. This is the most important part of becoming a better filmmaker. So check out the link in the description and join us at Unscripted Studio. So really nice work there. I really like the colors. I really like the progression of her day as we see her doing different activities with fluid transitions that you don't even see, connecting the geography of the house. That all I think is done really, really well. I have a little bit of an issue with the ending because I don't know why it went dark. I'm not sure what that was, and I also don't quite understand the really dramatic, like Avengers type of music at the end. I don't know what mood that was supposed to be. Was it supposed to be triumphant? Was it supposed to be like some sort of a horror climax? I just don't really know what that was. So accepting those last few moments, I do just want to talk about the beauty of these initial shots that transition us through the house. So just at the beginning there, see the camera's pulling back in anticipation of her sitting up. It's a really subtle thing, but she stays about the same distance from camera throughout this first shot. And that's good blocking. Blocking is the movement of the camera and the movement of the actors. That's good blocking when your character can move naturally within the shot without leaving the frame. See how her head is just barely reaching the top of frame? And at the beginning, her head's about the same size. So he coordinated this shot quite well with her to create a camera move that was dynamic and also sort of invisible to the audience because it just feels natural. And then of course that transition to the next room is totally seamless. And these kinds of whips, if you do them the wrong speed, they can be really annoying. But this is just the right speed and just the right amount of fluid motion so that it draws you into the scene instead of making you feel like you're being jerked on a roller coaster. And the lighting here is beautiful, the composition is beautiful, the colors are beautiful, and the way we transition to her doing a different thing in the same house, I mean, I totally get it. This is her going throughout her day. I would think maybe she would start with yoga and then do piano later, but you know, I'm not her. I don't know how her day goes. And look at the motion here. See, the moment the camera wipes past to reveal her, she raises her arm. That's good scene blocking because it gives us a point of interest there as soon as we enter this part of the scene. If it was bad scene blocking, she would have maybe been halfway through her arm move by the time we first see her, or maybe the arm move is over and she's just holding a pose, which is much less visually interesting. So the timing of the camera move with her movement sells the scene. Now, I don't know if I like so much the camera, moving back the opposite direction. It feels just a little bit unsmooth to me, but it's not bad. I mean, it still works because he drifts throughout this next scene and keeps this motion going. You see there's a little bit of, the camera's going like screen left, and it continues to go screen left even in this next shot. There's a little bit of screen left movement at the beginning of that shot there, which leads us smoothly into this close-up. And see the timing, again, this is good blocking when the timing just works out perfectly. We're moving through the window, which I guess was maybe like a gimbal monopod kind of move. And the moment we arrive at the bell pepper, right? Whatever that is she's cutting, the moment we arrive at the cutting board, she is perfectly framed. Her hands are now in a close-up. And then we move away. And we're given just enough time to absorb what's going on before we move on to the next scene. Looks very simple, looks automatic, but it's not. This is something you have to plan in advance. You count out the number of steps it takes to reach the right moment, and you have your actress do it over and over and over, probably, until the timing looks just right. So that's the main problem I see when people try to do long fluid one-shots with gimbals, is the timing's a little bit off. Things don't quite happen at the right time, so it creates dead space. It creates time when the audience is just waiting for something to happen. Or something happens and the character is sort of halfway out of frame. Like maybe she was, starting to do her cutting and we weren't quite locked on her yet. Then it would be hard to focus on what's going on because we would still be moving around. Our vision wouldn't be settled. Notice he gives us a chance to settle before she starts to cut. Let's watch it again. And we're settled, and then she cuts, and then we move away. Very subtle, very quick, but it's necessary in order to make these one-shots work. Then we go to the TV. You see that she's watching TV. She's very into it. Now, I would expect this to be later in the day, and I would prefer actually for this footage to be taken, at night. And it could have totally, there's no reason not to do that because we have this transition point, that wall. We could have transitioned into night here, which I feel would have made this more effective because she's watching what looks like a movie or some drama show, and I just think of those as being nighttime entertainment. She's not watching Ellen, she's not watching daytime TV, she's not watching the morning news. and she's eating popcorn. I don't know, all that feels like nighttime stuff to me. And then it is night when she's gaming here. Yeah, and then there's that horror sort of thing at the end that I don't quite understand. Otherwise, very beautiful work, Carol. Good job. Okay, now we're gonna watch Bored by Tiny Square Feet Media. Great close-up. Great use of natural light to create a dramatic mood. Very David Fincher-esque look here. Descent into madness. So that video very clearly shows us what happens to some people when they are a little too bored. So that's, a classic downward spiral descent into madness kind of montage. We've seen it a lot in movies. It plays on a lot of what our expectations are for that kind of a scene. It's been parodied a lot, and this is sort of, I guess, halfway between the real thing and a parody. It feels a little bit sort of like Key and Peele in terms of the tone, like Jordan Peele, having that sort of comedy, but also sort of serious feeling to it. Very dramatic lighting, but also over the top. I think my favorite moment is the yelling into the fan stuff here. Let me see if I can find that. Here it is, yelling into the fan. I mean, who hasn't yelled into a fan just to see what it sounds like? And the way he does it with that sort of dead-eyed stare, like there's a lot wrong with his head, basically, and it's very clear. And one thing I want to point out is the use of light to create the dramatic mood. Now, it may seem obvious that you get a dark look when you film in a garage, but it's actually not just dark, it's backlight. And he's putting the camera facing the window almost all the time. Almost everything we see is either half lit like this, where the light is coming to the side of the character's face, or it's backlit like this. And that's a very conscious choice. If the camera was just on the other side of the garage, if the camera guy was standing with his back against the garage door and the light was going toward the character and we were filming the character's face, then the character would be evenly illuminated from the front and the whole garage would look bright, actually. So it would look the opposite of this from the other angle. It would actually create sort of a more happy, open mood. So the deliberate choice to keep everything backlit or rim lit, keep the character mostly in shadow, that really creates a strong mood here. And yeah, and I want to touch on one thing that a lot of people bring up, which is color grading. So color grading does not create the lighting in your scene. Color grading creates the color of the shadows and the highlights in your scene and the overall bias of the color in your scene. But what you're seeing here with like the dramatic mood here, this is partially color grading because the color grading controls the contrast and controls the little bit of maybe blue tint in the shadows that's going on. But the sculpting of the light across his face and the shape of that light and the way it all feels, that's captured on location. That's the only way to do it. You can't create that look in post. You can't create this kind of rim-lit feeling to a shot in post. That has to be very carefully shot so that you get the right look. So before you worry about your color grading, just learn how to use light, learn how to use natural light. Look at all your shots and say, if this was a photograph, how would I light this photograph? Or how would I compose this to make a great photograph? See, this shot, his body is very clearly outlined by the light from the window. this rim light separates the subject from the background while creating this dark noirish mood. So it serves a couple purposes. It keeps the shot very clear so that we can tell what's going on, and it creates a strong mood. So that's, just good shooting, I guess, is what I want to say. Anyway, good job here. Tiny Square Feet Media on board. Next up, we're watching The Escape by Michael Freechild.
Watching everything you love destroy itself, that was the hardest. The virus outbreak, it spread overnight. Most of the systems, they all collapsed immediately. The weak, they turned to hate for comfort. That hate, it turned into fear, then division. It consumed everything, including hope. There was not much left to hold on to. You suddenly realize how fragile all this is. The precious illusion that everyone held on to, it became unrecognizable. And everything went online and became virtual. And if you were one of the lucky left alive and had the ability, you were able to traverse the escape.
Okay, cool. That's obviously more of a setup. That's sort of like maybe a teaser for a much longer video, but I like the premise. I like the world building here. I like how he does a lot with just sound and voiceover while still keeping it dynamic visually. Exposition, let's talk about exposition again. Most of this video is exposition. Most of it is just telling you what you need to know in order to understand the story.
Watching everything you love destroy itself, that was the hardest.
Okay, so watching everything you love destroy itself, that was the hardest. That puts us instantly into the mind of our protagonist, and we see our protagonist acting all paranoid, which lets us know that the world outside is dangerous. So this is voiceover that gives us an emotional quotient as well as just information. Again, I think this is more interesting than just showing a news broadcast and showing news broadcasters saying, the COVID-19 virus has now spread to 20 million people worldwide and there's over 100 million infected, blah, blah, blah. Just reading off those statistics, that's the easiest, laziest way to do it, but I would much rather see a video where it's tied to a character's feelings. Watching the world destroy itself was the hardest part. That's a very personal thing that a character would think, a character would feel, and that's more what filmmaking is about. It's about putting yourself in the mindset of a protagonist.
Virus outbreak, it spread overnight.
And here come the facts.
Most of the systems, they all collapsed immediately.
Fact.
The weak, they turned to hate for comfort.
So he's explaining the world.
Turned into fear, then division. It consumed everything, including hope. There was not much left to hold on to. You suddenly realize how fragile all this is.
Yeah. So you suddenly realize how fragile all this is. All that dialogue in the first half of this video was basically just setting up why this guy wants to go into the virtual world. So we have a nice sort of break. We have a nice dramatic turn at 34 seconds. He builds a lot of world in just 30 seconds in the beginning. And then at 34 seconds, we get the payoff, which is, going into the virtual reality.
Precious illusion that everyone held on to, it became unrecognizable. And
yeah,
everything went online and became virtual.
VR world here. By the way, that jungle sound effect that comes with Final Cut Pro, I know that because I use it all the time. There's better sound effects out there that aren't so recognizable. Very small criticism. It's one I need to take myself because I find myself going to the Final Cut sound effects library way too often, and everybody's using those sounds. But you notice we're seeing his hand from his POV, right? Obviously, that's him looking at his own hand. But it's not like a GoPro super wide look. That's one thing I kind of hate about a lot of POV shots is that they use that ultra wide perspective when that's not really the way the world looks to us. We see the world more like this. We see the world more in like a 50 millimeter lens kind of thing. Sometimes we see things wide, but sometimes we see things much more narrowly. And when you're doing POV shots, it's something you might want to think about. You may want to choose a perspective that accurately reflects the emotional state of the character rather than just an ultra-wide objective kind of shot. And the way I like to think about it is, in this POV shot that I'm shooting, what is the character focused on? If it's a POV shot of somebody looking out at a broad landscape, then I may want to use a wide shot for that. If it's a POV shot of somebody maybe looking at something in the distance, maybe there's someone on a horse in the distance in the landscape, and they're focused on that person riding the horse, and they're wondering if that person is riding toward them, then I might use a really long telephoto lens for that POV shot, because in their mind, they're not focusing on all this landscape out there. They're focused on that one person riding the horse. So you just narrow it down to what the character is actually focused on. And the closer the character is to the subject they're focused on, the more the background should be out of focus. Just like you see here with the hand, the background is very out of focus because the hand is very close to his face. Whereas with this wide shot here, we're still in his POV, but it's a wider lens and everything's in focus because he's focused on the entire landscape and the landscape is far away. So that's my take on The Escape. Good job. Next up is I'm Home by Jay.
Alright, so here's the rules of the game for making your bored filmmaker challenge video.
Hey, look who it is.
60 seconds or less. It should take place all in one location, wherever you happen to be
Mama!
watching right now. And it should feature a character who is bored at home.
Mama! The fuck? Ba't bukas to? Mama? Mama?
There's good suspense building with the POV thing here.
Ano yan? Ba't dito bukas?
That little bit of reflection of the mom, the water running. You don't know why. It's good suspense. Seven, the film Seven on the TV.
Mawawalan tayo ng tubig at bukas.
I like that film because it's shot with, I guess, just a phone with some sort of wide angle attachment on the phone to create the fisheye look. Like the look of the film is very, very rough, but the storytelling is pretty solid. You know, we establish our character's confusion right at the beginning. We know what's going on.
Alright, so here's the rules of the game for making your bored filmmaker
You know, the
challenge
character's just on their phone watching me.
60 seconds or less. It should take place
And
all
here's a
in one
noise.
location, wherever you happen to be.
Mama!
We have nice clear subtitles
It should feature a
to
character who is bored at home.
help us out if the audio is unclear. Yeah, and we see our character get out of bed. And she goes to the bathroom. I mean, there's all these elements that are building, like, you know, water running. Why is this water running? That seems strange. So we're expecting the worst.
Mama?
And then, I love this, there's this little brush past the mirror
Mama?
and the reflection of the mom there. See, mom's watching TV. Couldn't pause it at the right spot. And then the water's running here. So it's like creepy, like why is mom not reacting when we clearly see her watching TV? And I also like that we catch the reflection incidentally. You know, when you're shooting these POV kinds of things, you really have to try to make it look unrehearsed and unforced. And here, we see the reflection of mom, but we don't see the reflection of the main character. We don't see the reflection of ourselves, because obviously it'd be somebody holding their phone. So, you know, they very carefully avoid that here. Watch it again. See that? So we don't break the suspension of disbelief by seeing ourselves in the mirror, which is a clever touch. And it adds to the suspense because, yeah, why isn't mom reacting? She's clearly calling mom's name. And then mom's gone. Where did mom go? Seven, David Fincher classic on TV, which has a similar tone to this film. I'm sure that was no accident. And then, you know, of course we expect some kind of a stinger at the end. We expect somebody to come out with a knife and stab our character. But instead of it being that, the tension is completely subverted because there's a completely reasonable explanation for this whole thing. There's a water shortage tomorrow. And she's just trying to fill up all the tubs at once. And that's so awesome because I didn't see it coming, but it makes total sense. And one good thing to keep in mind about good storytelling, it should feel surprising yet inevitable. So when you have a twist in your story, you should surprise your audience But when your audience looks back, they should see, oh, this is the only way it could have ever been. And it's really hard to create those kinds of twists, which is why I picked this little short film, because all the creepiness could have led to a very obvious conclusion that there's some killer in the house or a ghost or something like that. But instead it leads to a very reasonable, normal explanation that keeps us grounded in reality. So the laugh that it got from me was a very real laugh, because I'm like, oh yeah, that is probably what Mom would do. So good job, Jay. Next up is Voices by Topher Films. Really intense color, sound design. It's honestly almost a bit too much for me, but it has its own style. I think it's well done for the style that it is. Cool. Another horror film, but with a different tone, because this one's about obviously a young woman who kills a guy, and she does it unintentionally with pills. So what I like is that the backstory of this, what happened before she wakes up here at the beginning, is established through voiceover and through little bits of flashbacks, but it's established very quickly and very dynamically. So we see the pills, we see the dead guy, and then everything starts going crazy once she realizes what has happened. She realizes maybe she's a crazy person. It's pretty clear. It's not 100% clear because there's all this jittery cutting and stuff. But yeah, I did basically understand what was going on. And yeah, the reason I put it in my selections here was largely because of the lighting, which I thought was really creative, the flash cuts, which I liked most of. I mean, I think it did go a little bit overboard, and the point where I feel like flash cutting and like fast cutting and stuff goes overboard is when it affects the clarity of the story. And you notice I keep using that word clarity. Clarity is so important to telling a good story, because if your audience doesn't know what's going on, they can't possibly care. And in this one, I understood about 80 or 90%, but there was a lot to follow all at once. There were subtitles, there was, flashes to what happened before, there was our character in the present moment coping with her situation, and I think there were even maybe like dual layers of subtitles sometimes. A lot of stuff stacked on top. A lot of complexity going on here, which again, I mostly followed, but I didn't 100% entirely follow. So I picked this one because of the mood. I think it could be inspiring to anybody that has some colored LEDs lying around, or like LEDs where you can change the color or do any sort of flash effects, because this is a pretty good utilization of those built-in effects on some of the newer LED lights. It's a good way to create a mood out of a room that would otherwise be really boring. I mean, look at this, look at the area they're in. I mean, if you look at the actual walls, like what are they working with here? It's like nothing. You've got carpet on the floor. You've got, I guess, a TV, right? There's a TV and white walls. And all this texture, all this mood, all this like atmosphere is created just through lighting and some flash effects added in post. So I think that's very creative. Good job on that. And good job using the contrast between blue and red. Blue here in the foreground, red in the background. Sometimes I think it was the other way around. I think it was red in the foreground, blue in the background, or like red with a bit of bluish shadow. That consistency in the color scheme makes it feel like a more polished production. So yeah, it's just a good example of how to make the most of a very boring, or at least nondescript kind of location like they were shooting in here.